Well, this game just kicked my brain so hard it rolled off the floor after the ending popped up. BioShock Infinite is another case in the video game history after Metal Gear Solid where the storyline takes over the gameplay. Thankfully this time it isn't trying so desperately hard to take over the gameplay. Although some people might appreciate the storyline of Metal Gear Solid, I can't really appreciate an art form and it's just pretentious. And by the way, in my opinion, Metal Gear Solid 3 is a great game with a very clear storyline if you actually replay it like 5 times. But thankfully, Infinite isn't gonna be that pretentious because unlike Mass Effect 3 where the endings raises a lot of heavily metaphorical and intelligent questions for all the gamers around the world like why is Tali literally a 3-finger 2005 Miss England model? Oh crap, spoiler. The Mass Effect Happy End mod and BioShock Infinite's ending prove that you can have a solid ending that wraps up all of the plot together without giving the player some unnecessary moral choices. Yes, even though you are my Game of the Year Dishonored, I'm dishonorably looking at you. BioShock Infinite only becomes pretentious at some moment with villains that had some ridiculous motivation like this Slate guy that looks like Jeff Bridges from True Grit. This guy is pretty much like Seth Green from The Italian Job where he worked really hard for something yet he's not credited for the work. Instead, someone else is credited for the word. Maybe that's why they call him Slate. That stands for something totally lame. Anyway, why am I trying to talk about this game if I haven't told you the story? In this game, you play as Booker DeWitt, the guy in the game's cover, thankfully not silent and not faceless protagonist like the usual BioShock protagonist could say. He is tasked to go into the beautiful floating city of Columbia in which he must rescue a girl named Elizabeth, whose age is still a complete mystery to me. Well, with Elizabeth on board, you might be thinking, oh crap, looks like we're gonna have another Ashley or Sheva or even worse, Amy to take care in this game. Well, Elizabeth doesn't qualify as those 3 numb nuggets in the first place. Yes, once you meet her, you have to escort her and get her out of the town, but in this game, she actually helps you by giving you things that can be essential in the middle of the battle, like salt or medicines or even ammos. She also gives you some money, and the best part is during the battles, you can literally ignore her. She will be like just staying out of the battlefield and try to find the best place to protect herself. It may sound unrealistic when I bring it up, but what kind of benefits does realism bring into games these days? Now, I don't usually talk about the character's appearance in video games, but looking back at how they design and advertise Elizabeth than the actual game, I have a few comments. My expectation on this game is pretty low, and so is my expectation on the game itself because I barely ended BioShock because it's not very well optimized on the PC. I've never had issues with sound effects in video games I've played on my rig, but BioShock shows that I really need to upgrade my onboard sound card. But don't worry, that was in my old PC. You can play great games like Dishonored greatly on the same game engine, but still. BioShock Infinite is very well optimized on the PC, so I highly recommend getting that version instead. But the point of all this talk is, Elizabeth is one of the most beautifully designed characters in a video game I've ever seen in a while. I don't like horribly designed characters like how Ellie in Dead Space 3 turned out to be just Chloe clone, but I love Elizabeth's character design. I'm trying to think of someone else that looked familiar, and the only one that I got is Alice in Madness Return. By the way, almost all of the games I've mentioned throughout this review are on the same Unreal Engine. Isn't that a coincidence? But not just her character design, her personality, her somehow bolder voice, her AI behavior in the game, her mysterious age is enough to make someone beautiful for me to make her one of the best female characters in video game history. Now, unlike the first game where in a game where you are in an underwater city, there's like almost no swimming or something except in the intro, BioShock Infinite introduces us to the concept of skyline, in which you use one of these sort of wheel thing you got early in the game to transport yourself from one place to another via these railways in the skies. It's a lot of fun using these railways. It makes you feel like an actual sky pirate if it does make any sense. The gameplay itself is not really that good compared to the first one, and that's one of the reasons why people don't really like it that much. The plasmids are now replaced by vigors, but for some reason the vigors themselves have barely anything to do with the overall plot. Yeah, you can see some people practicing the vigors on the Colombian festivals and some audio logs mentioning them, but even when they do mention the existence of vigors, the main plot barely has anything to do with them. Nobody seems to give a damn on the existence of vigors when they can be actually useful in combat and create tough enemies, but ironically these vigors don't seem to have that much of use. Now, instead of stocking up health and atom potions to be used later like in the first game, the game has a regenerating shield mixed with traditional health system a la Mass Effect 3 and scavenging potions a la Dishonored without the regeneration. You can no longer stock yourself some health kits because apparently the only way to get health now is to loot foods or find medic bags, and because the shield drops down a little quicker than I thought, you can get easily killed in this game, especially in the final crappy tower defense level. You can no longer stock up some salt potions because apparently the game doesn't want you to do so, and even if you hate the first BioShock combat, you might agree that the weapons are well organized. The weapons in this game are just all over the place and they are split in parts. They are the weapons used by the authorities and the weapons used by the resistant group called Vox Populi. More punishingly, you can only use 2 weapons a la Call of Duty, and throughout the game I only used a few weapons I consider useful enough. I ended up using the volley gun for the big guys and the machine gun, which I always constantly switch with the carbine rifle, the shotgun, the Vox Populi shotgun that I forgot the name, and even the pistols. The upgrade system in this game is balls. It only allows you to upgrade a single weapon. Their costs are really expensive. If that doesn't bother you, their upgrade menus are all over the place too. I ended up saving my money for salt potions and refilling my ammos, and even when I'm playing in the normal difficulty, I ended up not upgrading vigors because they are barely useful both in gameplay and the plot, and they are really expensive as crack. One thing that doesn't make sense is the fact that you can carry like almost every gun in this game's ammunition, which includes like more than 12 RPG ammos and 28 volley gun ammos, but you can't carry guns themselves even without them. How does that work? It's like in gardening you can stock like 20 apples and 30 oranges in a basket, but you can't stock like a piece of grape. That just doesn't make any sense. Other than that, why is this game trying to be something else when it shouldn't be trying to be something else? I have to give her credit for the first BioShock for originality. Alright, that's too much ranting about the gameplay, but to be honest, even with all of those issues like the unorganized weapons, unorganized weapon upgrades, barely useful vigors, 2 weapon system, regenerating shield system, 1 hit takedown from Skyline which takes out all of the challenge, barely useful gears, not really that interesting optional mission, tower defense in the final level which is crappy, and that one when we have to fight the same boss 3 times, the gameplay is mostly fun. From all of those issues I've mentioned, the gameplay of Infinite, I'm only bothered with the ones I've mentioned before and finding the same boss 3 times in the tower defense final stage. I mean, seriously. But seriously, again, I can find like 20 most overlooked flaws in Skyrim and I can only find 4 of them that bothered me. Most of these flaws are even fixed with mods, so why bother talking about the flaws if it can be fixed? And why do you really care about all of the flaws that you're not really bothered with? As long as you're having fun with the game, you're good to go. And BioShock Infinite is really fun to play, even with all of the flaws I've mentioned. How about the graphics? Well, there isn't much to talk about other than the fact that it's beautiful. I've never seen a game using HDR this intense. Infinite is putting a lot of efforts in the graphics, especially in the lighting and color saturation, which is some of the most intense I've seen in a while. The depth of field is just fine. The character models look like the ones in Dishonored, but they're mostly fine. And now let's talk about the most important part of the game, the story. Like I said, the storyline of BioShock Infinite takes over the gameplay. And how does it take over the gameplay? The biggest compliment that I can give for this game is that I beat this game on a normal difficulty all day straight right after I bought it. Now that's not because the game is short, it has a pretty nice length for an average game. I beat it for like 8 or 9 hours straight in the first day I got it. It's pretty rare for me to play a game all the way until the end credits the first time I play it. The only game that got me to beat all the way into the end credits straight on the first time I play it is Portal, and that's only because it's really short but also absorbing. Infinite is not short, but it's definitely really absorbing in many aspects, including the interesting world of Columbia and the chemistry between the 2 lead characters that are really well executed. The villains, though not as strong as the first one, is also pretty threatening. At least it's much better than the BioShock 2's villain, where you just couldn't really get their motives. This time you do get their motives, and it's very much understandable. One flaw that I can only find in the storyline is the continuity issues with the concept of reality manipulation, which I will not spoil because it's really confusing, and I might get a lot of misinformation to all of you guys. Somehow the reality manipulation thing is kind of makes the game a little confusing and kind of pointless actually. The other thing that I'm kind of confused is how the Lutece twins manage to go back and forth between the sections throughout the game and how they can disappear. Admittedly, they are some of the most likable characters in video game history, but they still doesn't add up. Also, why is Comstock putting Elizabeth in this world where she's constantly being watched? Doesn't she felt a little lonely for a while or something? But I was shocked in how the game managed to get all of those plot holes and tied it up all together in the ending. This is one of the most debatable video game endings since Mass Effect 3, but unlike Mass Effect 3, BioShock Infinite's ending is leading into the good ways. Confused about the reality manipulation thing? Don't worry, it is explained in the ending. Confused about how the Lutece twins go back and forth between different situations? That was also explained. Confused about Comstock's motives? Don't worry, it was also explained in the ending. Yeah, even though it's kind of sad, it's fantastic. Mass Effect 3's ending didn't work because it couldn't manage to resolve all of the plot holes inside the game, and the game ended up rather sad and insulting. Infinite managed to resolve all of the plot holes in the game, ended up rather sad, but still manages to get me to say that it's a fantastic ending. That's an amazing achievement right there. There are moments in the ending where I simply drop my jaw, especially if you have played the first BioShock game. In the end, BioShock Infinite is one of the best games of 2013. Even though the gameplay kind of falls flat with some of its flaws, it's still a really fun game to play, and it's one of the most unique experiences I've had in years. The characters are likable, the graphics are beautiful, the gameplay is mostly fun even with all of the flaws, and the ending is fantastic. It's one of those games that I beat like 7 or 8 hours straight because how interesting the storyline is and how satisfying the ending was. Infinite gets a 9 out of 10 from me. It couldn't beat the first game, but it's definitely a worthy sequel than that half-ass game that I will never mention again. Ever. So thank you everyone for watching this video, and I'll see you guys later on the next video, only if you guys subscribe to me, so subscribe!